This episode of Gather and Go is brought to you by Visit Atlantic City. Live to explore in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Atlantic City welcomes one and all to the seaside destination where local spirits are connected and the celebrations are unforgettable. Learn more at visitatlanticitycity.com. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I am Brian Jewell. I am your host. I am so glad that you decided to spend some of your time with us today. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to do everything we can to make that investment of your time worth your while. Now, today, I'm going to bring you a really interesting and informative featured conversation with Theresa Nemetz. If you don't know Theresa, she is a culinary travel entrepreneur who has a whole host of food-focused tour companies, both locally here in the U.S. and outbound tour companies doing culinary trips abroad. This is going to be a delicious conversation. Sorry, couldn't help myself there. You are going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy getting to know Theresa, and you are going to learn a lot from her. Before we get there, though, let's start with some travel news you may have missed. Several U.S. states are introducing environmental mandates for hotels. The Illinois State Senate recently passed a bill that would prohibit hotels from providing single-use plastic bottles in guest rooms. Instead of offering small plastic bottles of shampoo, lotion, and other toiletry items, Illinois hotels seeking to provide those amenities would have to use refillable bottles, which are often installed as permanent fixtures in hotel bathrooms. If the bill passes the Illinois House of Representatives and is signed by the governor, the new regulation will apply to every hotel in the state. Hotels with more than 50 rooms would be required to comply starting July 1st, 2025, while smaller hotels would be required to follow suit by January 1st of 2026. Now, California became the first state in the country to prohibit single-use plastics in hotels last year. New York has passed a similar law, which began implementation at the beginning of this year, and a ban in Washington state is set to begin implementation in 2027. Well, now it's time for the road tip segment of our show. This is the part of every episode where we reach deep into more than 2 decades of travel experience on the road and bring you tips that we think will help make your next trip less stressful and more successful. Now, I just got back from a great familiarization trip in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's part of our on-site FAM program for tour operator readers and listeners across the country. Had a great time there in Myrtle Beach with our hosts. And one of the things that they did that I just love about their FAMs is they provided the most handy and useful little pocket itinerary. Now, there's nothing fancy about this little pocket itinerary. It was basically just a very brief version of our itinerary for the entire week that they had formatted onto a small slip of paper that they had folded into 3 parts that could fit right in the back pocket of one of those name badge holders that goes on a lanyard that you very frequently get at a trade show or a conference or a similar kind of event. Now, I loved that pocket itinerary. I found myself using it all the time. In fact, I found myself using it more than all the other versions of the itinerary that I had brought on that trip. You know, I remember that back when I started in tourism, when I would get an itinerary for a tour, whether it was a commercial tour, a retail tour, a familiarization tour, it always came printed on 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It was usually several sheets of paper long, and I would have to put it in a folder, in a file folder, carry it in a notebook. And yes, it was helpful, and yes, it had plenty of detail, but I had to keep that notebook or that file folder handy on me at all times. Now, as technology progressed, of course, we got PDF versions of those itineraries that we could save to laptops. I would save it to my cell phone and could always reference that if I needed it. But none of those things was quite as convenient as I would have liked. Now, today, of course, there are some specialty apps that allow travel planners to create itineraries that people can store right on their phones, even some itineraries that can be updated in real time. And those are super helpful. I am definitely a fan of those apps. But I've got to say, there was something amazing about having that pocket itinerary on a piece of paper that I could literally slide in and out of my pocket. One of the things I loved is that it was just so quick to access, even quicker than trying to access something on my phone. And my hand is going in and out of my pocket so often throughout the day already to grab something from my phone, to take a picture, to look something else up, to check the weather. And frankly, I found it refreshing not to have to get out my phone one more time to access itinerary information when I needed it. Having that pocket itinerary made it really easy for me to plan for my day, to keep track of where we were in terms of our activities and our timing, for me to figure out what clothes I needed to wear for the next day, what kind of activities I needed to be prepared for. But here is the real magic that I think would be really helpful to you. I have been on dozens and dozens of these kinds of familiarization tours over the years, helped facilitate and lead many of them. And very often my experience is that I get a lot of questions from our guests about where we're going next and the timing of things and all the sorts of things that tour participants are likely to ask. But my experience in Myrtle Beach was that when people had those pocket itineraries, they asked me fewer questions. In fact, I can't even really remember anybody on the trip asking me any question about the basic logistics or timing or activity of that tour or that itinerary, because everybody had their own version of it at their fingertips. So if you are a group travel planner or leader who could really benefit from having more time on a trip to enjoy the trip yourself or to delight your travelers with great experiences and have to spend less time answering basic questions about where you're going and when, let me encourage you to maybe offer that pocket itinerary as a lo-fi and low-cost way to serve your customers. It's going to help them because it's going to give them information they need at their fingertips, and it's going to help you because you have to spend less time dealing with routine questions. That is your road tip of the week. Well, before we move on, I want to give you just one quick note from us. You heard me talking just a second ago about our on-site familiarization tour program. This is a program we've been doing for more than 10 years now, where we partner with destinations around the country and even some internationally to bring our travel planner readers and listeners to get to know those destinations firsthand. We do several of those a year. They're always some of the highlights of my year. I enjoy getting to know these destinations and getting to know people like you who I meet on those tours. Now, we have more coming up for 2024. We're already working on some for 2025 as well. If you would like to learn more about our on-site familiarization program and how you can get a spot on one of those tours, it's really simple. All you have to do is go to grouptravelleader.com/FAMS. That's FAMS. That will give you a page where you can see all the trips we have upcoming and a great overview of some of the trips that we have done in the past. And while you're on that page, you can also sign up to be on our mailing list, so you get very first notice when we have a new trip to tell you about, and you can be one of the first people to submit your application. We usually get many, many more applications for these trips than we have spots to accommodate people. So your best chance of getting to join us on one of these is to get your application in just as soon as you can. So go to grouptravelleader.com/FAMS, see what we have coming up, sign up to be on that notification list, and you can join us for a great trip later this year into 2025. We would love to see you there. And hey, if you are a destination representative interested in learning more about how you can partner with us on an on-site familiarization tour, please give us a call. You want to call us at 859-253-0455. Reach out to Kyle on our sales team. He would be happy to fill you in on those details and put together a FAM package that is going to showcase your destination to wonderful travel planners and give you great visibility. Now, it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Theresa Nemetz. As we get into this, let me remind you, you don't need to worry about taking notes because I am taking notes for you. That's right. You're going to find a wrap up of the most important things that Theresa and I talked about in the show notes for this episode. Show notes are simply the text that you find below the audio player in whatever app or website you are using to listen to this podcast. And I'm going to come back at the end of the episode and go through a couple of those most important highlights as well, just to make sure you don't miss them. Also, let me encourage you to stick around through the end of the conversation and the wrap up, because after that, I'm going to share some of my thoughts about these new green mandates for hotels and what kind of role they should or shouldn't play in the travel industry. We'll be right back with Theresa Nemetz. Atlantic City is ready to celebrate life's greatest moments with thrilling year-round events and attractions. With 24-hour gaming at 9 casino resorts and stellar entertainment throughout, Atlantic City is sure to provide iconic celebrations. Historic, wooden, and more than 5 miles long, the Atlantic City Boardwalk attracts visitors from all around the world as they create their own waterfront memories. You can stroll the wooden way by foot, on a bicycle, or via the legendary rolling chair. Bask in the glowing sun, take a dip in the Atlantic Ocean, or stroll along the white sandy beaches to find the perfect seashell. At the famous and free beaches of Atlantic City, adventure is on the horizon. Known for its thriving culinary scene, Atlantic City welcomes all to explore its famous dining establishments. From celebrity chef hotspots to locally owned eateries, Atlantic City's restaurants are well equipped to accommodate special events for large or small groups, served in unique spaces. Start planning your Atlantic City trip at visitatlanticcity.com. All right, everybody. My guest today is a travel entrepreneur who turned her passion for culinary experiences into a family of thriving tourism businesses. She's the founder of Milwaukee Food and City Tours and now operates culinary adventures in cities throughout the Midwest and Great Lakes area. She has also launched an outbound international tour company called Travel Deliciously and is a popular consultant and speaker in the tourism industry. Theresa Nemetz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm excited to have you here. You are a kindred spirit of mine. I basically see travel as an opportunity to eat new things in new places. And so I love the work you're doing. I would love for you to tell our audience how you found your way into tourism and culinary tourism, because like most of us in this business, you didn't start in tourism and hospitality, right?
Right. I actually was a professional fundraiser. So I was a fundraiser for about 20 years, raising money for nonprofits. And I just happened to go on vacation out in New York City, picked up a brochure for this thing called a food tour. And we booked a ticket on it, having no idea that that was going to be a life-changing moment. Many people that have started food tours now, I've learned, have actually been inspired by going on other food tours. And that was our story. We went on the Foods of New York tour, and we're standing there, and all of a sudden we're talking to a local, and we're learning about his neighborhood, and we're walking around. And I remember going to Murray's cheese shop, and, while we're eating cheese, just said, we could do this in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's got a great story. So that's really how it got started for us. And I realized that my fundraising background was just a great way for me to have that sales experience and that experience of really being able to do something with limited resources and be able to kind of make it happen. So I'm so thankful for that background that I had and what it led me to.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned limited resources, because that's one of the great things of an experience company is there's not a ton of overhead, right? I mean, you can get going without having to, get 6 figures worth of outside investment or something like that. So tell us what the process was like when you said, all right, I'm going for this. What was the deciding factor that made you, put out a shingle and decide I'm all in on this food tour?
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, you're right. You don't have the overhead. And that's the beautiful thing of it. I didn't even realize I was starting a company when I started my company. And so I just went to a home store and I actually bought a walking wheel so I could measure the distance between the different restaurants in the neighborhood. And I just started to put it together, and at the beginning, you just have to have, a great pair of walking shoes, and you have to have a laptop and a cell phone. And that's really how that began. Of course, as we've grown through the years, in order to expand, we ended up purchasing buses. And so once I bought a fleet of buses, that's when you need to be thinking about your overhead and be able to move money around. But at the beginning, you're absolutely right. It's a fairly low risk kind of a venture.
Yeah. So buses definitely gets you into the higher limits of, how much you have to spend. But I love it that you said, you know what, I'm just going to put on a pair of shoes and figure this out. So what did you learn about how to do a food tour well? Because you started just as someone who had enjoyed one before. How did you learn what the best practices are and what people responded to and all those nuts and bolts?
When I reflect on my very first food tour that I led, it was for a bunch of ladies that were coming actually from Chicago and the Milwaukee area. And they had a couple cocktails beforehand. And so here I had built a huge script, 30-page script. I practiced. I walked the neighborhoods. And then when I went and did the tour, they actually didn't want the history lesson. They didn't want to know that building was from 1892, right? They wanted to know about the neighborhood. And so I think that for me, that was the best lesson coming out of that first tour, was that they wanted to know about the people behind the stories. And so, food tourism makes food the attraction. And I think that we not only make the food the attraction, but we really focus on the stories of the people behind that food. And so when I'm putting together a food tour, it's really about the history, the architecture, but then also the community and the culture and being able to tell that story. It used to be, not to, go back, 30 years, 20 years ago, you'd go to a new city on vacation, right? And you'd always kind of look up and find out where the best restaurant was. And, you'd probably, pack a suit and, make advanced reservations. You go to the fanciest, most expensive restaurant. And what I've found now is that travelers don't want that. They want a super authentic experience, and they want to meet that 80-year-old that's making the pierogies. They want to talk to the older gentleman that's making third generation sausages. And so that's what I like to put at the forefront of our experiences. It's not the history lesson, but it's a great meal with a side of history kind of an experience.
Yeah, I love that because, food is so integral to culture. But when you just show up in a city on your own and, look at Yelp and Google and book restaurants, you're not necessarily going to get that glimpse into the culture or those authentic experiences on your own. So it really takes that local expert, that person who has connections and can make introductions to create those authentic and moving experiences. So can you give us some more insight on how you take a food tour and use that food to introduce people to culture and really help them appreciate the destination they're in?
Yeah, I think, you hit it on the head when you're talking about experience and the locals. And I think it's really about tapping into that local community and who can tell the story of their community. I typically, when I'm interviewing people to be tour guides, I'm not looking for that person that's that polished, perfect tour guide. I would much rather take someone that has lived in their community for 40 years. They love their community and they've had a unique kind of career path that's taken them and woven their lives into the community, because I want them to share that experience on the tours. And so I think, when you talk about the locals, yeah, anyone can Google where to go to eat, the top 10 list on Yelp or whatnot. But I think when you meet with a local, that local is what is really the star of the show, right? Because they're going to tell you, I'm taking you these locations, but just so you know, at the end of the tour, go around the block and there's this other little place and this is where you guys are going to love. And they really customize that, right? Because they're talking to someone, and we can have a tour with a couple on a date night. We could have people on a bachelorette party and people out of town, right? So really listening to what each person wants and then being able to kind of tell them, okay, this is where I would recommend you go. This is where you should go. This is where you should go, and really open that up for them. So that for me is how we kind of pull that culture in, is having amazing tour guides and quite honestly, going and interviewing the locations that we visit. Because if, so say you're going to build a script point and, you can go and Google a place that's, 100 years old, right? There's plenty of information about that 100-year-old sausage maker, but you're going to get so much more information going and sitting down with that sausage maker and just stopping in and saying, tell me about your life. I feel like I've become very endeared to all the small business owners that we feature on our tours, because I feel like I've gone and I've really learned their story.
Yeah, this is interesting to me because I guess in my mind, I think of restaurant kitchens as being incredibly busy, small business owners having 100 things going on all the time, but they make time for you and for your group. So tell me how you developed those relationships with people who are wearing 100 hats and ingratiated yourself to the point where they're willing to meet with the people that you bring in.
Well, nowadays, I think that the fact that we spend money at locations and people know of us after 17 years, they want the tour groups to come to us. So now they see us and they recognize the economic value to making a few minutes to talk with us. But I remember at the beginning, at the very beginning, very first tour route we ever wanted to do. And the one restaurant that I felt like was critical to have on it, they, in like 60 years, they never took a single restaurant reservation. They did not make reservations. And they were like, no, you cannot bring tour groups here and you can't make a reservation. And so here I was, this young woman, and I just kept showing up every single day with 16 people at 11:30, and I had the exact same order every single day. And eventually, one of the waitresses, she was very wise, and she was like, okay, we're going to make a reservation for you. I'm going to be your exclusive waitress, because she realized that we were tipping very well. And I always laugh because that restaurant to this day, 17 years later, they take reservations now for everyone. So I'm always like, everyone can thank us for the fact that this very historic Italian pizzeria now takes reservations. So at the beginning, it was hard, right? No one wanted to talk to us. They didn't want to tell us their story per se. But I think I just kept showing up with tour groups, and I knew who the owners were, walk in the door. And I like to do this little thing when I'm leading a tour. I encourage our tour guides to do this as well. You walk in the door, you see the owner, you stop your tour. You are no longer the star of the show. The star of the show is the person behind that counter. So just call them over and say, everyone, this is such an amazing opportunity. Joe is here. And that's the owner that I was just telling you about. And then we start to kind of interview the restaurant owner, and we get them talking with the group. And from there, I think that we've built a good relationship now that we walk in the door, owners come over, they start talking to groups, and they recognize that people come back time after time then. So we're just really opening the door and introducing people to locations.
So I was probably, I don't know, I may have been late to the party because you started 17 years ago. It was probably 10 years ago when I took my first real food tour. I do feel like it's a trend that has just exploded, let's say, in that past decade. So nearly every city in the country is going to have some kind of food tour company. Most of them have not reached the scale you've reached. They haven't reached the popularity and the growth. So I wonder if you have any insights about what you are doing, whether it's on the tour side or the guides you hire or the restaurants you're going to or something in your marketing. What are you doing that is resonating so much that has fueled your growth?
Well, I think that's definitely a combination of things has been for our success. Definitely hustle. So we've had a lot of hustle, and we've created a lot of opportunities. I oftentimes say with our team that, we don't say no to people. So when you look at why are we successful compared to some other food tours, a lot of food tours do one thing, and they do that one thing well. Maybe they have one tour route, or they just do 3 walking tour routes, right? But when you look at what we do walking tours, we do bus tours, we own our own buses, we work with convention groups, we'll work with private custom, groups of 2. So we'll work with groups of 2 to 200. So if a group comes to us, we say, how can we find a way to make it happen? And I think that that's really what has led us to be able to scale as quickly and as successfully as we have. I think also the fact that we are really very professional. I think when we first got started and people would come to me and they need a tour itinerary, I'm just kind of making this up along the way to create an itinerary. And now all these years in, I send our team all the time to sample at new restaurants in whatever the cities are, to go to any time that we could go to a museum, to see an attraction. People call us all the time to tell us about their locations. We want to learn about it because we want to be able to build an itinerary that's more than food. We're not just that walking tour that you call us and we'll do one of 2 things. Really, you call us, you tell us what your problem is, and we will solve it. If that means walking tour, food tour, bus tour, whatever you need.
Yeah, I love that. Just never say no. That's great.
Right.
So you are now working in other cities where you didn't grow up, where you don't have those close cultural connections. You're serving some Great Lakes cruise lines and stuff like that. How do you take that approach when you're not a local anymore? When you're not relying on your own experience and still create that successful tour in that place that's not your hometown?
Yeah. Well, just because I don't live in all the different cities on the Great Lakes doesn't mean that I don't have a passion for them. And it doesn't mean that I can't lean on others that do live in those communities. So as we have expanded and grown into those other communities, number one is going to see the communities myself and with my team. In the last 3 years, we've traveled extensively on the Great Lakes. And when we go to a city, we're not just swooping in to, see the top highlights. We're really sitting down with people and we're asking them, tell us what your favorite things are. Tell us what you think that we need to be including into itineraries. We join a lot of chambers of commerce and CBBs, and we really rely on the locals. When we're hiring people, we're not bringing someone in from a different city. We are bringing someone in that has lived in the city for 40 years and they want to tell their story. So, yes, behind the scenes, there's a company that doesn't reside exactly in that city, but we have a passion for it. I can personally tell you that I myself, even last summer, we were doing tours up in Duluth, Minnesota, for example. I had never been to Duluth. I've now been to Duluth about 15 times. And I've fallen in love with that town so much that last summer, we actually took our family up there for 2 weeks or so, enrolled my kids in summer school up in Duluth. I work from Duluth. I've become quite endeared to the city. So
yeah,
I think that that's really what we do. And so I'm not the person leading the tour though, right? So for me, it's about who is leading that tour and how passionate can they be about their community.
Yeah. Okay. So you're hitting on something that is a pain point, I know, for so many people in tourism right now, which is just hiring at all, let alone hiring those people who are passionate and hospitable and have deep connections to the community. Do you have any secret sauce on that? Or is it just trial and error or just like tons and tons of interviewing? Like, how do you find these people?
Well, we have an amazing HR director. One of the things, so in the last 2 years, we've scaled up and hired about 200 tour guides in the Great Lakes area.
Wow.
And so we had to use technology. So we have a new payroll system. So we use an online time clock, for example. We use Spark Hire for the interview process to be able to essentially have people pre-record their interviews for us so that we can more quickly go through it. We really rely on talking to people in the community and saying, who do you think is the best storytellers in the community? And then calling them. But to be entirely honest with you, I think that the secret to the secret sauce is to pay people really well. That has been our number one motivator. And, if we're going to pay people really well, that means that we have to charge our clients, a really appropriate price. And I think that when we first got started, I didn't realize the value of that. And I think in the last couple of years, I've realized that, the tour guide is really the star of the show, and we need to really make sure to accommodate them, because I can't teach someone 30 years of history.
Right.
And so if I want to have that VIP experience, I really need to be able to recruit and retain those individuals.
Yeah, for sure. So when you look at your customers, and I know they're coming from all over, are there any trends that you see in terms of demographics or psychographics? Do they, come to town looking to spend a lot of money? Are they trying to do something on the cheap? Are there any trends, or is it just like anybody and everybody is taking food tours these days?
Well, I think anybody and everybody across the board, not only within my companies, but I think just in the industry in general. When I look at it, I think that people really, they want that, they want more than dinner, right? They want an experience. And I think everybody on all levels can do that, whether it's a family with young children or, retirees or anything in between. People just want to really be able to experience that city. And when I look at kind of who our demographic is, that's where I say, we're unique in that we kind of hit a lot of different things. We have corporate planners, and they have a very different demographic. They're coming in from out of town. They want to wine and dine. They've got the higher budget. We also have the field trips. And so the field trips usually doesn't have a great budget, but they have a real, it's really a mission of ours is to be able to tell the story of the community. And so how we kind of fit in with them. We have tours with bachelor parties on them. Really, for me, I think it's a puzzle and figuring out who your customer is and what the best fit is for them. And we talk about that on the team a lot because, if someone calls us and says, I have $20 a person in my budget, I know that I don't have something for them. So just being really honest with them on that. But then if someone calls and says, I have $200 a person for my budget, okay, what kind of experience are we going to create them? Because we don't want them on the tour that's the $60 price point, right?
Yeah.
So really having that really open conversation with the clients and with staff that we can really kind of put someone in the right fit of an experience.
Oh, I love that. So after a long time of local tours, you said, you know what, I'm ready to go outbound. We've got this idea to do some outbound international tours. How did that idea come about? And what is it looking like? What's it shaping up to be?
Yeah, I guess I look at Travel Deliciously and the Travel Deliciously brand as an opportunity to take culinary vacations. And when it first got started, I was a much smaller, younger company, and I just saw it as my opportunity to travel the world. And then the pandemic happened and the world stopped traveling. And so we had to really put Travel Deliciously on the back burner for a while. But at the heart of what we do, it's about all things delicious and being able to have these great experiences. And so we were hearing from customers constantly, we've been on all of your tours in Milwaukee. We've been on your tours in Chicago. We want to travel with you. And so that's really where that brand has come from. And when we have gone out there and we've said, okay, how are we going to build this itinerary? We've really leaned on experts in those other communities. So just like I lean on experts on the Great Lakes, I'm leaning on experts in those other countries to say, what kind of itinerary can you provide? And how can we tweak that together to make it a really unique and really delicious experience?
Yeah. And you can't be eating all day, right? I mean, in theory, that sounds fun. I've tried it a couple times. It's miserable to truly eat all day. So obviously you're having great culinary experiences on these trips, but what else are you doing? How does, that idea of a delicious experience inspire the rest of the itinerary when you're not eating?
Yeah. Well, for example, yes, we do the cooking classes, so we're going to Poland and we're going to a baking class to learn how to make cookies that you used to make with your Polish grandma. And, we're having, these top-notch food experiences. But, you don't want to go to a city and just see food or just eat food. And so there are all these other bucket list kind of experiences that you want to go and do. So, I'm just thinking you go to Ireland, you're going to want to stay in a castle, right? You go to London, well, let's take a double-decker bus ride, but let's also have high tea in a double-decker, a unique experience with that. So I personally, when we approach what we're doing with Travel Deliciously, we're not necessarily going for the cheapest itinerary. We're going for the quality experience, because if you're going to take all that time, like as Americans, we don't get that much vacation time, right?
Right.
So if you're going to take your vacation time, not only the money that you're spending for the trip, but your vacation time, don't cheap out. You might as well go for it, right? And so that's really what we're doing. We don't like itineraries that are really loose and, have a lot of free time or time at large to do something. We want to pack it in so that people really come out of there with unique experiences that they can write home about.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, in addition to having your pulse on the culinary scene and the cultural scene, you also know a lot of other experience operators, people that started day tours. I wonder if you are seeing many more of them kind of make that same leap and say, I've had some success operating day tours. Maybe I should try multi-day. Maybe I should try outbound. Is that a growing trend among city tour operators?
Absolutely. I'm a member of the National Tour Association. I'm on the board of directors. And when I look at the vendors that I'm using for trips, I'm using members that I'm meeting through NTA. And I'm seeing an increase in people that were doing day trips, and now they are converting over and they're offering these multi-day opportunities. Because I feel like as this next generation of tour operators, as we're all gaining experience, we're all growing and learning, and we're taking it up a notch. So you're going from a 3-hour walking tour to a day trip to a multi-day trip to an international trip, right? So we're absolutely seeing that. And I think it's bringing something new to the industry. I think you're seeing higher price trips, first of all. And I think that you are seeing more of that action-packed itinerary. That's that once-in-a-lifetime bucket list kind of an experience. I think that people aren't planning on going back to the same place every single year, and they want to have a new experience. So I see people building that into their itineraries. And I do see that next generation of tour operator, we're figuring it out, and maybe we all don't know the exact things to do. I think at the beginning, a lot of us are underpricing things because we don't know exactly how to do the pricing. So that's one thing that I've seen as a possible mistake that many in the industry are making. But I think we're figuring it out, and I think we're all lifting each other up, and going to make the next generation of travel really a fun experience.
That's so cool. Our industry has been in need of that next generation infusion for a long time. So it's exciting to see it.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that new generation is bringing is this, native sense of how to use technology, which is fantastic. Are there any tech trends that either you're already capitalizing on, or you're watching, or you're saying, hey, I think this could be really, really cool for our industry if we can figure it out?
Yeah. I mean, that's so true, right? And I think, pre-pandemic, everyone said, oh, technology, like we can't use Facebook ads to promote trips. We can't use, technology and apps to stay in touch with our groups when they're on the trips. And when the pandemic happened, the world stopped moving. And how were people supposed to stay in touch with their grandchildren? Zoom. Apps, technology. And so all of a sudden it just zipped us so far ahead, right? I mean, and that's where, I think of my parents. My parents never would have used a cell phone before. They never would have used an app before. And now they are using this. And so I think that's where we're capitalizing on it. I think tools are itinerary tools that are able to share that whole entire itinerary with a group. So it used to be that you'd go and you'd send your tour director and your tour attendees a folder and a brochure or a binder of information. I think that is quickly going away to where people are just putting it on the cloud and being able to have quick access to it. I think payment is another thing where a lot of tour operators, 10 years ago, everything was check and doing paper registration forms and mailing in checks. And now I think you have a lot of platforms that are very feasible for full trips to be able to pay for those trips online, to be able to do your deposits and your payments right there. So I think that that's another thing. I think also even paying your staff is a different world. So, it used to be that you would go out on trips and you would have to give them blank checks to be able to go and give tips at hotels to the luggage handlers and all this kind of stuff. And that's kind of gone now, right? Like there are apps and tools to be able to do that. So I think that that's really what I'm seeing, is that we're just making things more convenient all the way around. And when we make it convenient, as a tour operator, it makes it easier for us to move quicker. And for the customer, it makes it easier for them to just hit send and book their trip. Because nowadays, if you're going to book a trip, if you find an amazing trip to, Slovakia, do you actually need to call the tour operator and have a conversation about it? Not really, because if their itinerary is online and that's exactly what you're going to get, and you have their reviews, that they're legit, you can just click that button at midnight and go on a trip.
Yeah, just like buying socks on Amazon, right? It should be about as easy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how can people follow you, learn more about your companies, get in touch with you if they want to talk?
Yeah. Well, definitely check out traveldeliciously.com. That's where we have all of our international culinary vacations listed. And then if someone's coming to Milwaukee or Chicago, you can check out MilwaukeeFoodTours.com or ChicagoFoodTours.com. And of course, if you are a cruise line and you have a cruise ship that's coming on the Great Lakes, we want to talk to you at tourthegreatlakes.com. So check out our websites. And I love being able to talk to people in the industry. I love meeting people when I travel and go to things like the National Tour Association and American Bus Association. So reach on out and I would love to connect.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, before we let you go, we have some questions we ask everybody, and these are just for fun. So you can answer off the top of your head. When you book travel, are you going to book a window seat or an aisle seat?
Window. Well, window seat until that window incident just happened recently with the airlines. So now I'm not quite sure what I would choose, but always in the past.
I'll take a window seat, but not an exit row. Thank you very much.
I'll just wear my seatbelt the entire time. Let's just stay strapped into the seat. Yeah.
Smart thinking. So what's something you carry in your carry-on that you wouldn't hit the road without?
All of my luggage. I do not actually check any baggage. I always have just my carry-on because I don't want to lose my luggage. So I take everything.
Yeah, I'm with you. So if you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you head next?
Ooh, that is a great question. A week to travel and just go anywhere. To go to Australia would be pretty amazing, but I don't think I would do that in a 1 week time period. We have been doing some research because we are going to be launching a trip to either Belize or the Galapagos Islands. So that's probably logistically a little bit easier for a 1 week trip. So I would probably go with that.
Oh my goodness, Galapagos. That's on my bucket list for sure. I hope you make that one work. So the last question is, what is something you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
Oh gosh. So I have a unique opportunity that I have a Mini Cooper and we go on a cross-country road trip every other summer. And so I have just seen, when you fly over all these great little towns that actually make America. And so I feel like I've really experienced so much in America, and I've done it with my family and I've done that with my children. So I feel like they've always been in tow. So I'm not really sure if I'd have to return to some place to do something. I guess I'm always looking ahead at the next thing that we haven't had a chance to go and see, which for me has been more the national parks, Yellowstone, Idaho, that kind of area.
Oh, that's beautiful. One of these days, I'm going to have to pick your brain about family travel because that is growing for our family as well. So I need to get all your tips and ideas. But thank you so much for joining us, Theresa. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
All right, everybody. I want to take a minute to tell you about Corbin, Kentucky, home to adventure, history, and hospitality. Nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in southeastern Kentucky, and conveniently located off Interstate 75 by the shores of the pristine Laurel Lake, Corbin is the perfect adventure destination. It's home to Cumberland Falls and the only moonbow in the Western Hemisphere. Corbin is also the birthplace of KFC. You can still eat where it all began and tour the state-of-the-art museum to learn the unique history of Colonel Sanders. Stop by Sanders Park and take a selfie with the bronze statue of the Colonel, then spend a day enjoying the races at Cumberland Run, Corbin's new thoroughbred harness racetrack. And if you're a food lover, Corbin is definitely the place for you. Downtown is full of locally owned restaurants, not to mention lots of great shopping. When you bring your travelers, you'll find a warm welcome because Corbin loves company. To learn more, follow the Corbin Tourism and Convention Commission on Facebook or visit CorbinKYTourism.com. Brought to you by Team Kentucky. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with Theresa Nemetz. I know I definitely did, and I came away with a number of takeaways that I want to circle back and hit again just to make sure you don't miss them, especially if you are a tour operator, a tour provider, somebody who puts together experiences for travelers. I think there are some real insights here that you don't want to miss. Now, when I asked Theresa what people really want from food tours, she said when she started, she realized they didn't want a history lesson. They wanted to know about the neighborhood. They wanted to know about the people behind the stories. She said, we make the food the attraction, but we focus on the stories of the people behind the food because travelers want a super authentic experience. Well, that is so true, such a good insight. And I would venture to say that this insight doesn't just apply to food tours, but it applies to all sorts of tours. I can't even keep track of or count the number of city tours I've been on in cities all across the country and around the world. And here's the dirty little secret. Most of them are kind of boring, or they have too many moments of boredom because the guys are trying to inject too much history about too many sites along the way. It's more than most people can process. Instead, if you will focus on giving people a really phenomenal experience, a really authentic experience, and connect them to people, that is the kind of tour they're going to appreciate and remember and come back for. Now, when I asked Theresa about her approach to hiring top talent, especially in a very difficult hiring environment, she said, the secret to the secret sauce has been to pay people really well. That has been our number one motivator. And to pay people really well, we have to charge our clients a really appropriate price. She went on to say, in the last couple of years, I have realized that the tour guide is the star of the show. So I need to be able to recruit and retain those individuals. Theresa, say it louder for the people in the back. If you want to retain top talent, you've got to pay top wages. And unfortunately, in tourism for a long time, too many people have approached hiring as a bargain basement proposition. Now, certainly you can hire people who don't have as much expertise, don't have as much personality, don't have as much experience, don't have the kind of passion that you want for guest service. You can find those people and you can find them at a bargain. But those are not going to be the people that thrill and delight your guests. They are not going to be the people that represent your company well. They're not going to be the kind of people that have customers wanting to book with you again. This is an important lesson for all of us at every place in the tourism ecosystem. There is no substitute for great pay when you're trying to hire great people. And finally, when I asked Theresa about the trends that she sees in emerging tour companies, she said, I'm seeing an increase in the number of people who were doing day trips and now they're converting over and they're offering multi-day opportunities. Because as a next generation of tour operators, we're all gaining experience and we're all growing and learning and taking it up a notch. She went on to say it's bringing something new to the industry. You're seeing higher priced trips and action-packed itineraries that are once-in-a-lifetime experiences. I see people building that into their itineraries, and I see the next generation tour operators figuring it out. And we're all lifting each other up, and we're going to make the next generation of travel really a fun experience. Boy, how exciting it is to hear that kind of perspective from someone like Theresa, who is not from the World War II generation, who is not a baby boomer, but who is in fact one of the leaders in the next generation of tourism. You know, the more I get to know people from that generation, the more excited I am in the future of our industry. And I'm excited that so many of these people who are getting their starts offering just day tours around their city are seeing potential to grow into outbound tour companies, multi-day tour companies, and offer really compelling and unique and one-of-a-kind experiences. That is what our industry needs, and that is what is going to create a dynamic and bright future for tourism going forward. Great stuff there from Theresa Nemetz. Well, we talked earlier in the show about Illinois and some other states that are considering or have already passed laws that would require hotels to get rid of single-use plastics in their guest rooms. And that raises the question, is it a good idea for governments to be in the business of mandating green hotel practices? Well, I have some thoughts, and that's the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the show where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered thoughts on an issue that impacts tourism every day. And today we're going to talk about government mandates in your hotel bathroom. So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. These new laws banning single-use plastics in hotels are a dangerous trend. Now, I appreciate waste reduction efforts as much as the next guy, but I'm concerned that these new laws represent government overreach in the name of sustainability. And don't get me wrong, sensible government regulation has a role to play in travel, especially when it comes to health, safety, and consumer protection. But these new mandates have nothing to do with protecting people. And the problem they purport to solve is a minimal part of travel's overall environmental impact. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that overzealous regulators can do incredible damage to our industry. We shouldn't give them any more opportunities to do so. So if you're serious about environmentalism, by all means, continue advocating for green practices and supporting businesses that implement them. But when you begin using the power of law to force small businesses into costly changes, that's a journey I can't come on with you. That's the Hot Minute. That's how I see things anyway. As always, you are welcome to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. And hey, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us at podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every email that comes into that address. I love hearing from you. And hey, you never know, your thoughts, questions, or ideas might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Would you go to your favorite podcast app? While you're there, make sure you are subscribed to Gather and Go so you get the next episode automatically. And go over to the ratings and reviews area, give us a rating, leave us a review. That is super helpful, and I am grateful to everyone who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Theresa Nemetz for joining us today on the next episode of Gather and Go. I've got a treat for you. A brand new keynote that I delivered at the STS Domestic Showcase a couple months ago called Untapped, Travel's Hidden Power to Solve People's Greatest Problems. Yep, that's right. We're going to talk about transformational travel and how you can take responsibility and play a part in making sure your travel experiences contribute to real change in the lives of your customers and the places you visit. You don't want to miss that. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we are all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Tanya Simmons is our creative director. Ashley Ricks is our circulation manager and graphic designer. Our sales team is Kyle Anderson and Bryce Wilson. To advertise on the podcast, call Kyle or Bryce at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the group Travel Leader. For more information on our podcast, magazines, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com. This episode was sponsored by Visit Atlantic City. This vibrant city awaits your arrival, and the knowledgeable staff is on hand to assist you with everything you need to make your group visit a success. Learn more at visitatlanticitycity.com.